Keanu Reeves stepped onto a massive, luxurious yacht called the Majesty, which was worth over $100 million. The yacht was preparing for an exclusive Margaret, and the atmosphere was filled with wealth and grandeur. But Keanu wasn't dressed for the occasion. He was wearing a simple, worn gray hoodie, faded jeans, and an old, sun-bleached baseball cap. He looked out of place compared to the others who were dressed in expensive suits, gowns, and designer outfits. As he walked through the entrance of the yacht, no one recognized him. People laughed, mocked his clothes, and made fun of how he looked. They couldn't believe he was there, and one man, Lucas Langley, even publicly humiliated him in front of the crowd. At that moment, no one knew who Keanu Reeves was. They had no idea that the man they were laughing at was one of the most famous movie stars in the world. But soon, the truth would come out, and when it did, the whole room would fall silent. The day was bright, with the sun hovering high above the harbor, casting golden reflections on the calm, sparkling Mediterranean waters. The Majesty, a true floating palace, prepared to set sail on its most exclusive voyage of the year. This was not just any Margaret. It was a luxurious, 5-day trip designed for the ultra-wealthy. The purpose of the voyage was more than just relaxation. It was a high-class event aimed at raising millions for children battling cancer. The guests were some of the most powerful people in the world, including CEOs, tech billionaires, socialites, and aristocrats from Europe and North America. As the ship prepared for departure, a long line of black limousines and velvet-lined sedans dropped off the wealthy passengers. The scene was one of luxury, extravagance, and exclusivity. But amidst this crowd of sharply dressed, powerful individuals, one man stood out, not because of his grandeur but because of his lack of it. A man dressed in an old, faded hoodie, torn jeans, and a baseball cap arrived by a modest taxi. He had no entourage, no fancy luggage, and no grand entrance. All he had was a simple canvas backpack slung over one shoulder. He walked toward the yacht with a calm, quiet confidence, as though he didn't need anyone's approval. But to everyone else he seemed completely out of place. As he passed the porters, they exchanged skeptical looks. They were used to seeing glamorous people step onto the ship, but not someone like him. Without hesitation, he walked up to the check-in desk, where a woman in a silk blouse greeted the guests with practiced politeness. When the woman looked up and saw the man standing before her, her face showed a brief moment of confusion. She quickly replaced her surprise with a tight, professional smile. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, her voice polite but distant. "May I have your name?" "Keanu Reeves," he replied in a calm and unassuming voice. The woman looked down at the list of names, expecting to find his name on the guest list. But after scanning the paper twice, she frowned. "I'm sorry, I don't seem to see your name here," she said, her tone becoming more formal. "Are you sure you're in the right line? This is the check-in area for VIP guests." Before Keanu could answer, a loud voice from behind interrupted. "Is there a problem here?" The voice belonged to Lucas Langley, the CEO of the Langley Group and one of the yacht's largest sponsors. He was dressed in an expensive linen suit, designer sunglasses perched on his forehead, and a smirk that never quite left his face. Lucas walked up with the confidence of a man who believed the world was his personal playground. The receptionist turned slightly and explained that the man claimed to be Keanu Reeves, but he wasn't on the guest list. Lucas chuckled and gave Keanu a slow, assessing look from head to toe, with a smile full of amusement. "Step aside while we verify your information, sir," the receptionist said, her voice cold and dismissive. Keanu didn't argue. He simply nodded and stepped aside. He let the guests in their designer clothes and flashy accessories walk by, all of them casting him dismissive glances as they passed. Not one person offered him a seat or a drink. A pair of young influencers in expensive sportswear whispered and giggled as they walked past, one of them snapping a photo and posting it with a caption making fun of him. "Margaret starts and we already have stowaways." Keanu didn't seem bothered by any of it. He stood quietly, looking out at the horizon, his posture relaxed. He wasn't there to be recognized, he wasn't there to impress anyone, and he certainly wasn't there for the luxury. He was simply there to enjoy the peace of the ocean. But despite the laughter and whispers, everyone noticed him. They just didn't know who he was yet. The next day, the yacht came alive with the sounds of laughter, music, and the clinking of champagne glasses. It was the second day of the Margaret, and everything seemed to be in full swing. The waiters moved gracefully between the guests, offering trays of oysters, caviar, and cocktails. The exclusive lounge buzzed with laughter, and the atmosphere was one of wealth and privilege. But Keanu was still dressed in the same way he had been the day before. His worn hoodie, old jeans, and faded baseball cap. He wasn't interested in the fancy surroundings. Instead, he was looking for a quiet place to enjoy the view of the ocean. He walked through the yacht, heading toward the lounge, drawn not by the luxury but by the peacefulness of the open sea. As he approached the glass doors that led out onto the deck, Lucas Langley appeared once again, his voice dripping with sarcasm and superiority. "Well, well," Lucas said, his arms folded. "Look who's found his way to the grown-up part of the ship." Keanu turned calmly. "I just wanted a better view of the ocean," he said quietly. Lucas let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Oh, I'm sure you did," he said. "And I'm sure housekeeping wouldn't mind the extra eyes on the railing. But I must say you're bold. Most of the staff at least wear uniforms." Keanu met his gaze. "I'm not staff." Lucas chuckled, turning to a couple of women seated nearby. One of the women, a tan socialite in a Chanel wrap, whispered something to her friend and then smirked. "He looks like he got lost on his way to the mainland," she said, giggling. Lucas turned back to Keanu, his voice now cold and dripping with contempt. "Listen, friend," he said, stepping closer. "I don't know how you got on this boat, but this isn't a regular Margaret. This is a curated company. People pay 7 figures just to breathe this air. So do yourself a favor and stay in your lane." Keanu didn't blink. He looked Lucas directly in the eyes and asked, "And which lane is that?" Lucas leaned in closer, his voice dripping with disdain. "The lane where no one expects you to speak. The lane where you're invisible unless you're carrying a tray." Keanu didn't flinch. He simply stood there, calm and unbothered, as Lucas's words hung in the air. The quiet confidence of the man in the hoodie made everyone stop and reconsider the way they had been treating him. Lucas humiliated Keanu in front of everyone. There was a thick silence between them, broken only by the distant sound of waves crashing against the ship. The tension in the air seemed to hang heavy. Then Keanu spoke. His voice was calm and steady as he looked at Lucas. "You think you can see people clearly, but really, all you're seeing is your own reflection," he said quietly. Lucas's smirk faltered just a little. For a brief moment he seemed taken aback. Before he could respond, a waiter, unaware of the brewing tension, approached Keanu with a friendly smile. "Excuse me, sir," the waiter said politely. "This area is reserved for our VIP guests. May I kindly ask you to relocate to the promenade deck?" Keanu nodded politely. "Of course," he said with a calm smile. He stood up, and his movements were slow and unhurried. His posture was relaxed, and he walked past Lucas without looking back. As he passed, he paused for just a second, turned slightly, and quietly said, "Thank you for showing me who you are." Lucas froze, his jaw tightening in anger, but Keanu didn't wait for a response. He simply continued his path, his back straight and his steps measured. Behind Lucas, 2 women chuckled. One of them murmured, "He's probably just some washed-up actor pretending to fit in here." The other woman shrugged and added, "He'll be gone by tomorrow. People like that always are." But Keanu didn't hear them, or perhaps he did, but chose not to respond. The weight of the silence around him spoke louder than any words could. The next day was filled with luxury. A lavish brunch was spread across the upper deck, and the sun glinted off the silver plates and crystal glasses. White linen tablecloths covered every table, and the air was filled with the delicate sounds of a string quartet playing in the background. The guests were dressed in their finest clothes, and waiters in black uniforms moved from table to table, offering champagne, chilled rose, and fancy dishes that required subtitles to understand. It was a scene meant to impress. Keanu entered the brunch quietly, just like he had the day before. His presence wasn't commanding, but it still disrupted the flow of the crowd. People had begun to notice him, not because of who he was, but because they thought they knew who he wasn't. He took a seat at an empty table near the railing, where he could see the vast expanse of the ocean. He poured himself a glass of water from a crystal jug and picked up a small plate of bread rolls. He was unassuming, a man of few words, quietly enjoying the moment. But the laughter started almost immediately. One man, a loud and brash hedge fund manager from Texas, couldn't help himself. "Jesus, who let the janitor into brunch?" he barked, his voice cutting through the air. He was wearing loafers without socks and had a slicked-back mullet. He was the kind of man who wanted everyone to know how important he was. A woman sitting next to him, wearing large sunglasses, chimed in. "Are we doing charity seating now?" she asked. "Should we toss him a few crumbs while we're at it?" Lucas Langley, sitting at the same table, didn't even look up from his grapefruit. He spoke flatly, his voice calm, almost as if he were stating a simple fact. "He's not a janitor," Lucas said. "He's the stowaway I told you about." The people at the table reacted with mock disbelief. Someone whistled sarcastically, saying, Bold of him to show up again. Does he not have a mirror? Another woman, young and overdressed, narrowed her eyes and said, Do you think he's dangerous? Look at the way he sits. Like he doesn't care who's watching. He doesn't belong here. Lucas, who had clearly been enjoying himself, replied with sharp words. He doesn't carry shame, Lucas said, because men like him don't know what dignity feels like. At that moment, the waiter arrived with Keanu's plate of smoked salmon. But before the waiter could place it down, Lucas raised his hand and called out loudly, Are you sure that table's been cleared? I'm pretty sure he's not a guest. The whole corner of the deck fell quiet for a moment. The waiter hesitated, unsure of what to do. Keanu looked up at the waiter and smiled gently. It's all right, he said softly. I can serve myself. He took the plate from the waiter with a small nod of gratitude, his calmness standing in stark contrast to the tension surrounding him. The laughter from the table continued. Oh, he speaks, someone sneered. Another person added, Careful, you might spook him. He might scamper back to the engine room. But Keanu didn't react. He simply started eating his meal, unfazed by the mocking remarks. One of the women, who had clearly had too much to drink, stood up from her seat and walked over to Keanu's table. She leaned in close to him, her voice low and mocking, just loud enough for the people around them to hear. Tell me, she slurred, do you actually think you're invisible here? Or do you just enjoy being humiliated? Keanu didn't answer. She stood up straighter, huffing in disgust, and added, Maybe you're just hoping a rich person will take you home like a stray dog. Her words earned a roar of laughter from her table. Lucas clinked his glass with hers, pleased with her remarks. But Keanu didn't react. He simply folded his napkin calmly, stood up, and placed his plate on a side table. He turned to face them, but there was no anger in his eyes. There was just a calm, quiet presence that unsettled them. For a moment, the laughter stopped. Keanu stared at them, his gaze piercing through their facades. After a short pause, he spoke softly, but with undeniable strength in his words. It's always fascinating, Keanu said, how the loudest insults come from the most fragile egos. With that, he turned and walked away. Not quickly, not slowly, but with purpose. Behind him, the laughter turned hollow and faded away, leaving only silence in its wake. Later that evening, the sky above the ship turned a soft crimson as the sun began to set over the Mediterranean. It was the night of the captain's formal dinner, a black tie event for the rich and powerful. Guests shimmered in their tailored tuxedos and couture gowns. The room was filled with the kind of laughter and joy that only the wealthiest people could master. Every detail of the evening had been carefully curated to flatter the egos of those in attendance, from the engraved silverware to the live string quartet playing in the background. Keanu entered quietly, unnoticed by most of the guests. But Lucas saw him. From across the room, he pointed at Keanu, as though he were nothing more than a bug on fine china. We have a dress code violation here, Lucas called out loudly, his voice cutting through the room. Or maybe a charity case. I honestly can't tell. Laughter burst from his table, louder and more cutting this time. A woman with diamonds the size of marbles on her ears smirked and added, Maybe he's here to deliver food. If so, he's late. Another person said, Nah, he's probably here to clean the toilets. Should have come in uniform though. Might have earned a tip. Keanu didn't respond. He stood there, his hands in his pockets, his face unreadable. Lucas, thriving on the attention, wasn't done. You don't get it, do you? Lucas raised his voice even louder, drawing the attention of more people. You don't belong here. You're not one of us. You're not even close. Keanu didn't flinch. He took one step forward and the room went silent. Even the music stopped. Lucas scoffed, This is a luxury vessel. It's not a soup kitchen. I've spent millions to make sure this ship stays that way. Keanu stood still, listening. Then, without raising his voice, without anger or sarcasm, he said, You just proved something I didn't want to believe. Lucas blinked, confused. What's that? He asked. Keanu looked him in the eyes and said, Wealth can buy the room, but it can't buy the soul that should fill it. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving behind a stunned, silent crowd. He turned around and walked out. No one stopped him. They were too shocked, too uncomfortable, too embarrassed. And none of them, especially Lucas Langley, knew who they had just laughed at in front of the whole ship. But they were about to find out. Very, very soon. Outside, the night air on the Aura Majesty was cool. But inside the big fancy ballroom, something felt different. The chandeliers still sparkled. The glasses still clinked. The music still played. But it wasn't the same. Ever since the man in the hoodie left, something had changed. Lucas Langley sat back down with a smug smile. He lifted his glass of wine. "Well," he said, looking around the table, "that should send a message. No poor people in our special place, right?" Everyone nodded. But before they could say anything, the lights dimmed. The voices went quiet. A woman, the Margaret director, stepped onto the stage. A bright light shined on her. She had no idea what was about to happen. She smiled and spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "before we continue with our charity event, we have a very special announcement." People sat up straighter. Lucas didn't even look up. The woman kept talking. "This trip was made possible by many generous people. But one person gave more than anyone else." The room murmured. Lucas frowned. "One person? More than anyone else?" "This person gave $2 million to our cause before even stepping on this ship," the woman continued. Lucas's frown deepened. $2 million? Anonymous? The woman smiled warmly and turned toward the entrance. "And now," she said, "I am honored to introduce the man who made this whole trip possible." The room froze. A chair scraped the floor. A woman dropped her glass. It shattered. And then, there he was, walking in just like he had 3 nights ago. Still wearing the hoodie. Still wearing the cap. Still calm. Keanu Reeves stepped into the light. Someone near the front gasped, holding his chest. "Jesus Christ. It's him." A group of influencers whispered in shock. "That's Keanu Reeves." "Oh my God, that's actually him. What have we done?" Lucas's face went pale, as if all the blood had drained from his skin. He stood up slowly. "No," he whispered. "No, it can't be. That guy was him?" But it was. And there was no taking it back. Keanu walked up the steps. He nodded politely at the Margaret director. Then he turned to face the crowd. The crowd that had laughed at him. The crowd that had judged him. The crowd that had looked at his clothes and thought he was nothing. He didn't yell. He didn't look angry. He just spoke. "I didn't come here to be noticed," he said. "I didn't come here to impress anyone. I didn't come here to wear a fancy suit or get claps." He looked around the room. "I came here to see how people treat others when they think that person is nobody." The room was silent. Some people looked down at their laps, ashamed. "I was judged by my clothes," Keanu said. "Laughed at because of how I looked. Rejected before anyone even asked my name." He paused. The silence felt heavy. "But what I saw here tonight, it's not just this ship. It's everywhere. It's a sickness." He turned his eyes, calm but sharp, right at Lucas. "Especially," he said, "when the loudest voices belong to the smallest souls." Lucas's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His legs took a tiny step back. Keanu didn't flinch. "I'm not angry," he said softly, "but I am disappointed." And with that, he walked away. No applause. No flashing cameras. Just silence. Not a normal silence. A silence that squeezed the room. A silence that made people wish they could take back what they had done. Because they hadn't just embarrassed anybody. They had embarrassed Keanu Reeves. The man who paid for their fancy champagne. The man who paid for their comfy rooms. The man who paid for their beautiful music. And in doing so, they had revealed who they really were. Some time passed. People were still shaken. The ballroom, once full of loud laughter, felt empty now. Like a stage after the play is over. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Some forced tiny fake smiles. Others grabbed their drinks with shaky hands, not to celebrate anymore but to forget. And in the middle of it all, Lucas Langley didn't move. He sat like a statue. His fingers clutched his wine glass, but he didn't drink. His face, usually full of power and pride, looked different. Confused. Lost. And underneath it all, scared. Not scared of Keanu Reeves. Scared of himself. Scared of what he had just seen about who he really was. People around him moved away. The women who laughed at his jokes looked away. The rich man who cheered for him moved 3 seats down. The influencer who had posted mean things about Keanu hurriedly deleted her Instagram story. Then the ship's captain walked up behind Lucas. His voice was slow and serious. "Mr. Langley," he said. Lucas didn't turn. "Mr. Reeves has requested that his donation stay anonymous," the captain said. "And that no one makes a big deal about it." Lucas swallowed hard. "Of course he did," he muttered. The captain nodded. Then he placed something small on the table. A folded piece of paper. "He also left you a message," the captain said. Lucas stiffened. "For me?" The captain didn't answer. He just walked away. Lucas picked up the note. Slowly. Like it might burn him. He unfolded it. It was written neatly. Just a few words. You taught me something I already knew. Some men wear suits like armor. Others wear them like masks. You chose the wrong one. Kr. Lucas's hands tightened around the paper. He folded it once. Then again. Then again. But no matter how small he folded it, he couldn't make those words disappear. From across the room, someone whispered, I thought he was powerful. Pause. Turns out he's just loud. The words hit Lucas harder than anything before. Outside, down on the lower deck, Keanu Reeves stood by the railing. The night air moved through his hair. He stared out at the ocean. A young staff member passed by, then hesitated, then turned back. Mr. Reeves, the boy said, nervous. I just wanted to say, I saw what happened. Thank you. Keanu smiled softly. You don't need to thank me. But I do, the boy said. Because if someone like you can be treated like that, then what chance do people like me have? Keanu turned to face him fully. His voice was low but firm. No, he said. It means we all have a choice. To be like them. Or to be better. The boy stood up a little straighter and walked away. Behind him, the big ship kept moving forward, but something had changed. Not the decorations, not the music, but the way people saw themselves. And for Lucas Langley, a man who once thought he was the most important person on this trip, it became clear that he never really belonged here at all. The next morning felt like the quiet after a big storm. The sun was shining over the ship, the Orem Majesty, but it did not make people feel warm inside. The ship still looked beautiful, with its shiny floors, golden railings, and the soft sound of the waves. But now it felt empty, like a big party that had lost all its fun. The guests who once laughed and talked loudly, now spoke in whispers if they spoke at all. It was as if a heavy cloud hung over them, a cloud made of guilt and realization. People whispered everywhere. They said the name Keanu Reeves over and over again. At first they were surprised. Then they slowly realized what had happened. And finally they felt guilty. Some tried to make excuses. They said they didn't know, they didn't hear, they didn't laugh. Others just stayed quiet, feeling too ashamed to speak. They avoided eye contact, pretending to be busy with their food or looking out at the ocean. But no one could pretend forever. Lucas Langley did not come to breakfast. He had not said a single word since reading the letter. In his room, the curtains were closed, blocking the sunlight. He sat on his bed, his shirt wrinkled, his tie loose. The man who used to walk around like he owned the place now just stared at his own reflection in the mirror. He didn't look proud anymore. He didn't look confident. He just looked lost. His mind replayed the events of the previous night again and again. Each time it made him feel smaller and smaller. His assistant knocked on the door and walked in carefully. Mr. Langley, the news reporters are asking questions. Someone on the ship recorded what happened last night, and now it's everywhere. Lucas did not answer. He barely moved. He felt frozen in place as if his whole world had crumbled around him. The assistant hesitated, then added, Mr. Reeves' team sent an email. He doesn't want any interviews or attention. He just wants peace. Lucas sat still for a long time. Then, in a quiet, tired voice, he finally spoke. That makes it worse. He waved his hand to dismiss the assistant, then got up and walked to the window. He pulled back the curtain, not to look at the ocean, but to watch a small boat leaving the ship. On it stood Keanu. His shoulders were relaxed, his eyes looking forward, calm and peaceful. He was not angry. He was not seeking revenge. He had simply told the truth and walked away. Down on the lower deck, some crew members stood together, hands folded. Among them was a young waiter who had seen it all the night before. He whispered to a friend, he didn't need cameras or big speeches. He just needed to show them who they really were. Inside the ballroom, the ship's captain spoke to the remaining guests. His voice was steady but firm. This trip was never meant to be about who is rich or important. It was meant to be about kindness, generosity, and respect. Last night reminded us how much we still need to learn. He held up a note that Keanu had left behind for everyone. It read, You don't lose your dignity by wearing simple clothes. You lose it when you treat others as less than you. The room went silent. Some people nodded slowly, understanding. Others looked away, still feeling ashamed. The Orem Majesty kept moving across the sea, but people spoke less, took fewer pictures and acted differently. The fancy suit still looked nice. The champagne still flowed. But something inside the people had changed. And for Lucas Langley, that change would never go away. Because some truths don't disappear, they stay with you forever. Weeks passed, and the Orem Majesty reached its final destination. But the story of what happened on the ship had just begun to spread. A quiet video appeared online. It showed the moment Keanu stepped onto the stage. No dramatic music. No big headlines. Just the truth. Within hours, the video was everywhere. People all over the world watched as a simple man stood in front of a room full of rich guests and broke the illusion that money makes someone important. He didn't act like a big movie star. He acted like a mirror showing people who they really were. Lucas Langley's name disappeared from fancy party invitations. His business partners left him. He stopped giving speeches. And after a while, he stopped talking in big crowds at all. He had built his power on pretending to be great. But all it took was one quiet man refusing to play along to make it all fall apart. As for Keanu, he never spoke about what happened. He didn't need to. But in a small bookstore in Vancouver, there was a handwritten note taped to the window. The words were written in neat, looping letters. People give you status, but dignity is something you choose for yourself. Below it were just 2 letters, KR. Looks don't make a person important. Fame doesn't make someone valuable. The only thing that truly matters is how you treat others when you think they have nothing to offer you. In a world where people care so much about appearances, be the one who remembers. Dignity doesn't need attention. It only needs to be protected. Have you ever been judged for how you look? Or have you ever realized too late that you misjudged someone else? If you like this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling adventures, mysteries, and unforgettable moments. Your support keeps these stories alive and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching. I can't wait to see you in the next video.